Ralph's girlfriend happened to be a little different. She was a Siamese twin, actually. She was two women in one. She was a fiery redhead and a hot blonde with one extra leg, and she knew how to use it. Ralph thought he could make her happy, but nothing satisfied her like the urge she had to kill. She was a murderous and treacherous beast at times. Other times she was sweet and fun to be around. Even though she had two heads, Ralph called both of them Marlene. The truth is, Marlene was a knockout in every sense of the word, both literally and figuratively. Marlene always carried a weapon in her purse. Her choice of weapon was a stainless steel mallet. It weighed only 5 pounds, but she cracked most people's skulls like they were walnuts with this thing. After she did it, she was the most relaxing person to be around. It was as if every time she did it, she released a lot of pent-up anger. This was the case, at least on most occasions, but sometimes she just kept killing, until she finally grew exhausted. The blonde had the cutest giggle when she laughed. The redhead was the brain of the two heads. Nothing got past her. The biggest obstacle was the temper they both had. When one lost it, the other lost it. It only took a few seconds. The redhead was so feisty, the blonde was bubbly, fun and submissive. The redhead was controlling and yet a social butterfly. The blonde wasn't as much of a social butterfly, but she had the kind of smile that captivated people. Just an all-American look, while the redhead was sexy and fiery. It was quite the combination, Ralph thought. Some could say Marlene was absolutely intoxicating. They said they were one of the same, so Ralph just went along with it. They had such tempers. They made love to Ralph like no other woman could. Sometimes Ralph thought he was in heaven. Ralph was totally entranced by Marlene. Ralph had to help them hide the hideous murders often. They lost their tempers all the time. Ralph had to help them because he loved them. Ralph couldn't risk losing Marlene. Most people would say Ralph was a little crazy. Marlene was the best lover Ralph ever had or ever will have. Marlene was the only woman for Ralph, and she was all he could handle. Marlene was 5 foot 8 inches tall, and since Marlene was really two women, she possibly weighed around 200. She carried it all in the right places, if you know what I mean. Marlene grew tired of people staring at her, and if the situation was right and someone was staring at her, she cracked their skull open. Ralph tried to cover up the evidence, but it wasn't always easy. It was especially difficult if Marlene went on a rampage. Ralph was a mid-sized man, around 50 years old, and 150 pounds. He was only 5'7". Ralph couldn't get enough of Marlene's curves. He sometimes would grope her in public to prove to the world that she was no freak to him. When people still laughed, it angered both of them. Sometimes they attacked others together, but Marlene always led. They lived like nomads. Ralph would drive his old Chevy Caprice from town to town with Marlene riding in the back seat. She would sometimes message the back of Ralph's head with that third leg. Ralph thought that was so sexy. Ralph had to remove the passenger side front seat because of Marlene's third leg. It was just easier to have a driver's side seat and then the back seat. They stayed at various hotels and had no address. Marlene received a Social Security disability check for having certain mental diagnosis. They attempted to live off of her Social Security check, but it wasn't enough. They needed another supplementary income. This was part of the reason they killed. The nice thing about a mallet is it is usually a very clean kill if done right. It was in the middle of July in the mid-1980s, and Ralph and Marlene were traveling along the coast of Lake Michigan. They had gone through beautiful little towns such as South Haven, St. Joseph, and Benton Harbor. They decided to stop at a nice little hotel in a beautiful little town called Berrien Springs. Here they decided to stay just a day or two. There was a small bar near the downtown area called the Hobnob.